Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Katrina Kofed. I'm a non-diet nutritionist and a certified health coach, and I help people overcome emotional eating, overcome their struggles, anxieties, worries, tension, fear around food, and create long-term sustainable healthy habits for life. And today we are going to be talking about what to do after a binge or an emotional eating session. What we're not going to talk about is these boxes in the back of my video that need to be recycled. So I honestly was really excited to make this video because I feel like this is a topic that I wish I would have been able to learn about back when I was struggling with 5 years of emotional eating and overeating. And one thing that is like coming to mind for me about this topic is that I'm able to speak about this so positively and openly and just very direct and like get to the point. But back when I was really struggling with emotional eating, I literally like would not have been able to talk to anyone about this. And when I was struggling with overeating, I don't think I really told anyone. Like it took me years to really tell people what I had been dealing with. And I only brought it up if it was like relevant to the conversation. So it's a big thing for me now to be able to like share openly about it. And I just want you to know, if you're watching this video, if you struggle with binging, if you struggle with emotional eating, if you feel out of control around food sometimes, if your relationship with food isn't great, one, you are in the right place. There is a community here for you that is full of compassion and empathy, and also clear strategy of how to change and heal your relationship with food and stop overeating for life. And two, that you are valid in how you feel. It's valid to be frustrated. It's valid to be upset with yourself, but we also have to change those behaviors because staying stuck in that cycle is not doing anyone any good. So with that, let's get into these 7 steps I have that I recommend after a binge or after an emotional eating session. Okay, so after a binge, after an emotional eating session, what are we feeling? Probably feeling frustrated, feeling defeated, feeling discouraged, feeling ashamed, feeling guilty, maybe just feeling really disappointed in yourself. Maybe you are beating yourself up. There's usually a lot of like negative self-talk that's going on, right? You're just like not mentally in a great place. So this is why I think it's really important to make sure you give yourself time to vent and just like get your feelings out. And whether that is you journal, whether you record a voice note to yourself that you don't have to listen to again, like I just want you to think of this as like a brain dump where you get out all your frustration, your pent up emotion, like whatever is going on in your head. I want you to get that out of your brain because it's not going well when it's just stuck up in here. The other day I was talking about this with a client in a session, and I was explaining it as, I can't remember what it's called, but you know, in Harry Potter, when Dumbledore has his like pensieve or whatever that thing is. Someone in the comments, please tell me what this is. But he puts his wand to his head and he can like take out the memories and put them in here and they can like be in a separate place. That is what I want you to visualize that you're doing. You're removing like these negative, like this heavy energy that you feel after a binge or after an overeating session, and you're getting it out on paper, or you are just like getting it out of your mind. Okay, that's really important. Now, I will say sometimes when we are like in that automatic, like autopilot state of mind, you don't necessarily always want to acknowledge what just happened, and it's easier just to move on. If that's how you're feeling, feel free to skip this step, you guys. Always like take whatever advice, whatever recommendations I have, and leave what you don't find feels like it applies to you, or what you don't feel like would be most beneficial for you. Of course, that always goes without saying. So this step I feel like is something that a lot of people skip over, but I find that it's really, really important to make sure we're acknowledging our feelings and facing head on how it is that we feel. And again, like I said earlier, it's totally fair and valid for you to be frustrated, mad at yourself, disappointed, but we're not going to stop there. You can feel those feelings, but we're also going to talk a lot about self-compassion because that is a huge, huge part of this journey. Okay, and that leads me into the second step, which is practicing self-compassion and having a little bit of empathy for yourself, okay? Now, I find that a lot of people who struggle with overeating, with binging, with emotional eating tend to be perfectionists in some way, shape, or form, or have a really bad all or nothing mindset. And if you can relate, if you're a little type A like me, trust me when I say that I get how this feels. So I know that it can also feel like a hard ask to practice self-compassion when you're feeling this way, because in our brains, in our all or nothing mindset brains, it feels like having empathy and being kind to yourself would feel like letting yourself off the hook. That's why I want to distinguish. Practicing empathy for yourself is not equal to letting yourself off the hook and not holding yourself accountable to your actions and to like not changing your behavior at all. So I want to challenge your mindset right there. You can practice self-compassion for you and acknowledge that you're a person who still deserves love, respect, you're still worthy of all the good things in life, even though you're struggling with this problem of overeating or binging. So that's huge. Now, again, if you're already in your journal, this is where you can acknowledge those things. Even though I'm feeling like absolute crap right now, I acknowledge that I still deserve X, Y, Z and all the great things that life has to offer me. I acknowledge that I'm still worthy of love and acceptance and kindness from myself and from other people around me. Whatever affirmations, whatever statements, whatever works for you to kind of share that with your mind, that's going to be really important. Okay. Now, it's okay if you don't fully believe it right away, but it's still important that you get your brain into the habit of practicing these actions. Now, that leads me to step number 3, which is more physical health related, which is making sure that you are taking care of your body after overeating. In the case of a binging can really lead to a lot of digestive upset, can lead to bloating. Usually your stomach will hurt after. You're physically maybe gonna feel unwell. You might feel puffy, might feel bloated still the next day. So it's just important to stay hydrated, make sure you're drinking some water. And then we'll talk about movement in a second, but just really making sure that you are taking care of yourself. You know, if you need to have some tea to help you digest, stuff like that, maybe go for a walk or something like that to just like help move your body a little bit if you feel like you really ate so much where you are just like very physically unwell. Those are all things that can kind of like help at least soothe your digestive system a little bit and make sure you're staying hydrated. Okay, and that brings me to step number 4, which is talking about mindful movement. Now, a lot of people will tell you not to over exercise as a way to compensate for overeating or binging, and I agree with that sentiment. However, what I want you to focus on here is mindful movement and more so connection with your body. Overeating, emotional eating, binge eating happens often, obviously, because of our feelings and our emotions that can trigger us to want to use food to cope. But it also happens because we are so disconnected from our bodies that we're able to like turn off the signals from our hunger and satiety cues and we keep eating past fullness, right? So even if you feel full, it's like, okay, well, my brain is not quite registering that and we're not going to stop eating. We're going to keep eating despite that fullness feeling already being there. So the more that you can kind of like get in touch and get in tune with your body the next day or that same day, whether that is stretching, whether it's doing some gentle yoga, whether it's going for a walk, you know, like just standing outside and stretching a little bit and like breathing in the fresh air, spending some time in nature, whatever you can do to ground your body and just like get from your overthinking brain back into your body can be really, really helpful. Okay. Now, some mindfulness meditations can be really great for this. Something where you are like just feeling what it feels like in your body, you know, like doing a body scan type of meditation can be really helpful. I really recommend, my cat is down here. I really recommend any one of those tools, and this can be something that takes 5 or 10 minutes, okay? And I really do encourage going for a walk or moving your body in some type of way to reconnect your brain to your body, because that's something that can often kind of go just like unspoken or you just forget to do. And then typically what I see is that people will use extreme exercise as a way to cope with binging, and that will usually look like doing a HIIT class or going to the gym for 2 hours the next day or go, you know, running 5 miles or whatever the case may be. I want you to get into a habit of mindful movement outside of extreme exercise as a way to compensate for overeating. Okay, step 5 is going to feel a little challenging, but this whole list of activities, of steps might feel challenging for you, okay? And that is to honor your body's hunger and satiety cues moving forward. So again, next day, I don't want you to be thinking about how you should be restricting or how you should avoid a bunch of foods because you overate yesterday. I do want you to honor your hunger and satiety cues. So if you genuinely are not hungry for breakfast in the morning, it is okay, in my opinion, to wait until later until you're hungry. Now, what's important to note here is that that's assuming you, like, let's say normally you eat breakfast at 8 a.m. and your lunch is at 12. If you know you're gonna get hungry at 10, it's probably still a good idea to eat something small at 8, since you know your next opportunity to have lunch won't be until 12. Do you see what I'm saying here? So don't use that as a way to like, oops, I restricted, like, you know. I want you to be mindful of your hunger and satiety cues and wait until you're actually genuinely hungry to eat, but I don't want that to turn into you under eating on accident or purpose, right? And it's really important here to do your best not to restrict the next day. I know that it feels like something you have to do after you overeat, but truly, overeating leads to restriction. Restriction leads to more overeating or binging down the road. And I just uploaded a TikTok video all about perceived food restriction versus actual food restriction, so I'll be sure to link that in the description. The cats are playing with toys. I'm sorry, guys. I'll be sure to link that in the description if you want to go check that out, because that's a really big part of it too, is not just like, are you actually restricting your food intake? Do you have a bunch of food rules and then you end up binging on the weekends? Or is it perceived food restriction where your food rules are getting the best of you, but you find yourself overeating more often? There's a lot of different nuances and varieties that this can take on, okay? Point is, do your best to listen to your hunger and satiety cues and really try not to restrict. Try to bring in more of these foods that feel off limits or feel bad for you throughout the week. And remember that no food is truly good or bad. Some foods are simply more nutrient dense and others are less nutrient dense. And this brings me to my next point, which is step 6, to focus on eating more nourishing and just whole foods in general, okay? Again, I think it's really easy to have that tendency to want to use restrictive foods or to want to restrict our eating and then maybe use like super low calorie options, which if you are someone who is working to lose weight, those can absolutely be beneficial. And I do have clients incorporate some of those foods, but I always describe it as, if you're struggling with binging, if you're struggling with overeating or emotional eating, dealing with that issue first is always going to be our top priority over focusing on weight loss, right? For example, if you are looking to lose fat mindfully, the biggest hindrance to sustainable weight loss is going to be something like binge eating, okay? It's not going to be whether or not you're choosing like the low carb tortilla over like the regular wheat tortilla. Do you see what I'm saying? So what I really want you to focus on is just focus on whole, nutritious foods. It's okay to have carbohydrates. It's okay to have whole grains. It's okay to have bread. It's okay to incorporate these different foods that maybe wouldn't usually be included in your diet. But again, the point here is that we're trying to regulate your eating throughout the week so that you don't feel so restricted and it leads you to binge again, okay? So it's a hard cycle to interrupt, and I always tell my clients that I never expect this process to be easy. It's actually the most difficult part of stopping binging and healing your relationship with food, but it is so worth it, because the alternative is staying stuck where you are, and staying stuck where you are, restricting and binging, feels like absolute crap, and it's not a good solution either. And this is really the work that I do in my one-on-one nutrition counseling and health coaching program with clients. I also have a group program called the Method Healthy Habits for Life, where we really get into the details of this in a small group environment. So if either of those sound like something that would be beneficial for you, you can find all the details linked below. And I really cannot overstate the benefit of working with a health professional who understands what you're going through and can approach your struggles from both a nutrition and physical health perspective, but also the perspective of food psychology and helping you heal your relationship with food and understanding the thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and triggers that are leading you to these interactions and behaviors with food, okay? And that brings me to step number 7, which is seeking professional help if you feel like this problem has gotten to a point where you're not going to be able to solve it on your own, okay? And that's very often. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, I struggled with emotional eating for 5 freaking years. I was so ashamed of it. I felt so guilty about it. I was like a perfectionist in my day-to-day life, and this was like the opposite of perfectionism, right? So I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I was way too ashamed to even consider talking with anyone about it. And even if I did, even if I wanted to talk about it, I had no idea where to turn, right? So this is really like this is a big part of why I feel so strongly about sharing these topics and my recommendations and my advice openly now, is because it can feel so ultra personal and it can feel really shameful, but the only way it's going to get better is if you start to talk about it and start to seek advice and start to seek some help about it. So brings me to my point about seeking professional help, whether that is a therapist that specializes in food and eating habits that you feel like can help you work through your struggles, whether it's a nutritionist like me who specializes in food psychology and can also really get into the nitty-gritty of nutrition counseling with you. Whatever type of health professional you feel like is going to be the best fit for you and your specific struggles and what your needs and goals are, I really encourage you to seek out that path, because the alternative, like I said, is continuing to struggle with food. And while our struggles with food can go like a roller coaster, and maybe they're really bad for 3 months and then out of the blue it gets better for a little bit and you feel like it might be gone, it's not really gone ever until you heal your relationship with food, until you stop restricting, you learn how to stop binging, you learn how to really solve these struggles and these issues that like in a way that works for you. And that's the biggest piece that I can say, because what works for one of my clients is not going to work for everyone else, and what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for you. So it's going to look different for every person, but I can promise you that these problems like almost never just resolve themselves on their own. And even if you were to like magically stop binging, which does happen for some people if they go on different medications, for example, if they experience like a big life change, you know, like sometimes people will stop overeating because something happens. However, that doesn't do all the other things that we also are needing to do, which is like heal your relationship with food, overcome your food rules, create better boundaries around your routines and your health habits and your self-care. That doesn't happen just because binging stops. So it's really important to continue to pursue having a great relationship with food and feeling really confident and knowledgeable about your nutrition and health habits, outside of just like, my goal is to stop binging, my goal is to stop overeating. There is more that comes after that, because that's just the first piece of the puzzle. Okay, so I would love to hear what questions you guys have for this topic. Any other video requests you have, leave them in the comments below. I'm always so happy to hear from you. And if you feel like there was a specific step that you found really helpful or that you would love more elaboration on, please let me know. Again, I would love to hear from you. If you haven't taken my free quiz yet, I have it linked down here. It's a quiz to figure out what type of emotional eater you are, because there are actually 3 different types of emotional eaters. Just started raining outside, which is the most Pacific Northwest thing I can think of in the middle of my video. There are actually 3 different types of emotional eaters, and they all need a different approach to stop emotional eating. So make sure you go take that. Otherwise, I will see you guys in my next video.